Live tonight from the virtual Michigan International Speedway, we say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to round 19 of the 2021 SimSeats Real Sim Racing Cup Series. And as always, we're happy that you're strapped into the virtual seat and along for the ride with us on a Monday evening, where as always, my name is Evan Pasoko with Nolan Rempel and our producer downstairs, Hugo Luis. We are ready to go for the SimSeats 200. Nolan, just talking to pre-race about this one, a critical point in this championship, the second to last race of the regular season, and with Daytona coming up, two wild races to close out the year, especially if tonight is anything like we saw over the weekend with the NASCAR Cup Series, even last week with the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. It is going to be a big drafting mess, and we are guaranteed to be in store for a wild one tonight.
Despite draft playing a really huge part, Evan, in these next two races coming on to end out the regular season, that's about the only similarity that these two tracks share. Unlike Daytona, Michigan, you still have to lift in turns 1 and 3, and that means we could be seeing a lot of 2, 3, 4 wide action out here tonight. And with a stacked grid of 42 cars, I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot of that on restarts tonight.
It is going to be tight racing for sure. If these drivers want to push out of the gate, they can. And that's going to be a big question as well, is discipline. How conservative are these drivers willing to be? Of course, the big story is who is in, who is out of the playoffs with 2 races to go in the regular season. A big change last week in Watkins Glen when Liam Sheen took home the race win and punched himself in. So he becomes the number 9 seed in the standings. That leaves 7 points paying positions. And you take a look, Burke is the big question mark here, 16th position. Only, you can see there, the 9 points ahead of de Blasio in 17th. Cato, George, and Kamer all in the mix. But of course, anybody in the top 25, Nolan, can still win a race in advance. And that's been notable all year, but especially with Michigan and Daytona being the last 2 races of this regular season. I'm not confident if I'm Burke. I'm not confident if I'm even McBride or Nieto. I'm going to want a little bit of a buffer headed into that season finale.
I mean, especially Bradley Burke. I mean, you take a look at the gap right there, just 9 points separating Burke from de Blasio coming on over into the last 2 races. Rhett McBride, a little bit safer than de Blasio, but he does still need to try to work himself up, and obviously pushing for those elusive wins is obviously always going to be a key factor. I know one driver who might be looking to carry some momentum tonight could be Nick Silver. You see him sitting 10th place of the standings at 454 points. Pretty secure on points, but wants to secure that even more with a race win, which would, of course, follow up his iRock Series win just last week when he took home the championship for Liam Sheen. Didn't quite win the race, but I'll tell you what, he'll be taking some of that championship momentum into tonight's Michigan race.
Yeah, he didn't win the battle, but he won the war. Liam Sheen, winner at, that Watkins Glen race was 2 weeks ago. You mentioned Silver, the champion. That was last Monday night in the iRock finale. And, we talk about schedule. We've been hammering it home several times already, right? Michigan tonight, Daytona next week. But this starts a 12-week consecutive streak of RSR Cup Series racing. We will not be off until the middle of November, but we have a break in between the Winter Series and the end of this Cup Series. Of course, tonight big because when you have big draft tracks like this, anybody can win. When you go to a place like Daytona, even though the draft has been changed there in some of the recent updates to the builds, anything can happen there, which is why I said, listen, even if I'm 13th or 14th, I want to have a good run tonight because I do not want to be the bump driver. I do not want to be P16 headed into Daytona. Those races are historically known to be races where somebody could win, and we're not even going to touch those playoffs yet, Nolan, because this is going to be a long 2 weeks before we get there, but they are looming large. If you have waited till now to punch your ticket to the playoffs, the pressure is on, and that margin for error basically non-existent. You're going to have to be picture perfect in these last 2 weeks if you want to lock this thing up and race for a championship here in 2021.
And I can tell you right now, 3 of those drivers that are looking to be picture perfect today may as well be picture perfect out on the track at the moment. We take a look over at, of course, the qualifying standings as that's just starting to wrap up here. The top 3, not even 1,000th of a second separated them. 39.138 for first, second, and third. So Seth Merchant is currently the provisional pole sitter with Mara and Weimester right behind. That is astounding. I think that is the first time I've ever seen something of that nature in any qualifying session on the sim.
It's ridiculous, and we'll see if it holds. You can see the current sign on the left-hand side of your screen. They are all showing with the 39,139s, and I think that'll do it for qualifying. The number that you mentioned was important, 42 drivers attempting to qualify for this race, so nobody will get sent home. 43 is still the grid limit here in the SimSeats RealSimRacing Cup Series, unlike the NASCAR Cup Series, which has restricted it to 40 cars for the last couple of years. So everybody will make it into the show. The final couple of drivers trickling through. Kyle Kamer jumps to P4. He was right there on the doorstep as well. Of those drivers who have yet to put down a time in qualifying, though, none of them are top 15 in practice. So I'm not expecting any Hail Marys.
I wouldn't expect anything quite yet, but I mean, when you have the top 4 separated by 0.02 of a second, and even the top 5 separated by just 20 thousandths, it goes to show just how tight qualifying can be. And as it wraps up, that is going to be how it's going to shake down in the 42-car 100-lap race here tonight from Michigan.
And they will have a 1-minute warm-up session to trickle through before we get on the grid for tonight's SimSeats 200. Got his opportunity, as always, to say thanks to all the people tuning in and joining us. Of course, you're not going to want to miss the regular season finale next Monday night. That's August the 30th at 9 o'clock Eastern Time start from the world-famous Daytona International Speedway. Just looking at some of the names towards the front of the field in this qualifying session. When you mentioned Nick Morris, but the other guys, we'll go through the whole list in just a moment. But I knew coming into this, Nolan, that there was a chance we could have a shocker. Now I'm a believer. I'm really locking in that we could have a big shock here tonight at MIS.
I think that would be a little bit of an understatement. You can tell that Merchant, Mara, and Winemaster, 3 drivers who we're used to seeing to try to battle for positions inside the top 10, but never quite for race wins. At draft habit tracks, though, like Daytona, like Michigan, Talladega, etc., you always do have that chance that you can get one of those drivers who just manages to get that little bit extra luck pulled out ahead of all the other drivers in the field.
And with that, the warm-up session draws to a close. Let's go trackside and take a look at your SimSeats starting grid here this afternoon from Michigan. Pole position does belong to Seth DeMerchant in a 3-way tie. Nick Mara on the outside of the front row, Jared Winemaster inside of row number 2 in 3rd. Kyle Kamer, then 2 1,000ths off, will start from 4th, along with Brandon DeBuey and Michael Araya, your top 6.
7th place is going to hold Ross Cato with Adam de Blasio down in 8th place. Brandon Whitaker sits in 9th with Grant Davis just 0.04 of a second off of the pole sitter down to round out the top 10. Chris Rabel and Brian Chambliss 11th and 12th on row number 6.
Continue on down through Zach Carr and Sam Nieto going to double up for row number 7, ahead of Jeremy Miller in 15th position and Nick Silver in 16th. Daniel Everhart going to be in the middle of the chaos from 17th on the grid, just ahead of Eric de Blasio at 18th.
Down in 19th place, Agdale Phillip is at 19th with Thomas George, 20th. Kyle Trudell, 21st with Brett McBride, 22nd. Sean Casto, so Price Jr., 23rd and 24th.
Continuing on down through Cody Harris and Matt Mara through 26, Shade Parrish and Watkins Glen winner Liam Sheen, who still needs good points tonight, is back in 28th ahead of Bradley Burke and Steve Durham on row 15.
31st is going to be Joseph Tice with Joe Yates down in 32nd. Michael Kuczynski and Brandon 6th, 33rd and 34th. Sean Kalis and Trey Browning in 35th and 36th.
And then to round things out, David Washington, Trevor Trigo, Andrew Freenosh, Dylan Jones, Eric Stanford, William Schmidt. That is a look top to bottom at your SimSeats starting grid. Since 2009, SimSeats has been designing and fabricated high quality, made in the USA driving simulators, including motion systems, complete turnkey iRacing packages, and custom fabrication. Their customer base includes all racers from the amateur to the pro ranks, and everyone on the SimSeats team is a weekend racer too. Their passion for racing drives them to build better sim racing equipment. Join SimSeats seats for the thrill of racing at any time, in any car, and on any track by visiting sim-seats.com to learn more. A field of 42 cars is lined up behind the iRacing pace car, going to make the dive to the safety of the pit lane. As always, happy that you are spending a full throttle Monday night with us. On RaceSpot TV, it's Seth the Merchant's field to control at the front of the field as we say, let's go racing at Michigan. And lap number 1 is in the books. Seth the Merchant leads at the front of the field. Jared Widemaster, new look to that number 48 machine for the last couple of weeks. The car racing design Chevrolet taking second away from Nicholas Barra. It is Michael Lariah. Kyle Kamer, your top 5. Second time down the back straightaway. This is not your grandparents' MIS. Normally, you're talking about 215 miles an hour into the corner here. The Cup car nowadays about 191 top speed down into the mid 170s through the corner, and already you're seeing drivers line them up on the outside wall. To Merchant to the very inside, trying to break the draft and defend that race lead.
There were a lot of guys on that opening lap when they got around to the back straightaway and decided they did not want to have to deal with a whole lot of the chaos that was taking place up in front. They opted to fade all the way out to the back. Among those drivers was Nick Silver. I also saw Steve Durham fade out, and he is still starting to drop a little bit further towards the tail end of the top half of the field. So single file out for the first portion, but that doesn't mean they're not close together still.
Okay, they're going to stay at about these intervals. You're not going to really see drivers run away, although we talk about the dirty air. Well, if the draft keeps people together, the draft also makes it hard to pass other people. And that race lead, the clean air, going to be a very strong defensive position over the course of this race. Third Price Jr. puts a new fast lap in the middle bowl of the draft, back in traffic as Eric de Blasio looks on from P10, single file. In the first half of the field, I'm honestly pretty surprised that we're seeing this much space throughout the field, as there goes Zachary Carr on the outside. He's trying to complete that pass as he tries to get through, and look out! De Blasio gets tagged. What a save for the 11 car.
Great save there for Eric de Blasio. Had that 11 machine fully sideways through turns 3 and 4. Used the apron to his advantage perfectly there to wrangle that car back under control. I'm feeling Price Jr. may have just tried to force the issue a bit more than he should have. There's the shot to the bumper. Car swings out 45 degrees. As soon as he puts the apron, though, the car pretty much saved itself.
You're very fortunate that it was that low and the apron was there. Otherwise, he could have gotten really out of control. This Michigan International Speedway banked at 18 degrees. Super, super wide, though. Which is what makes it such a unique racing surface, and historically one of the fastest tracks on the NASCAR calendar. Not a ton of changing in your top 3 or so, but there are some drivers on the move. Adam de Blasio up 4 positions to P4, and Grant Davis up 5 positions to P5. Now, one thing we saw, I referenced the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series race last week here at Michigan. Referenced that one because that was a tale of strategies, Nolan. A lot of drivers in that one drove aggressively off at the start, but just as many were conservative, trying to stay fuel to get to halfway to make it a one-stop race. It appears that we're not seeing a huge difference in attack strategy this early on. You know, we're not seeing some drivers significantly slower, other drivers significantly more aggressive. So we'll see if that changes over the course of this race, but just an observation strategy-wise.
I mean, strategy-wise as well, especially when you're trying to go for those positions. I think a lot of these guys are kind of recognizing at this point in time, there's no need to really force the issue too much early on. It is a 200-lap race. 100 laps doesn't seem like a lot when you look at how many laps are at some of the shorter tracks, but it is still 200 miles. There's a long race ahead of you. That being said, it can fly past in a hurry. We're already closing in on that 1/10 mark as we cross over onto lap number 8. The Merchant does still lead. You see a couple of guys that are looking to get a little bit dicey further back. You would see Michael Araya making a pass up on Adam de Blasio, trying to go for 5th place, and he's going to be side by side now with the 21 car off of turn number 2.
Right alongside on the bottom is trying to complete that pass is Grant Davis. He will get the position into 3. It'll be a twofer because Adam de Blasio also gets on by, so you can drop Nick Mara back to position number 6. A career qualifying effort for the Makoti Setup Shop Toyota for Mara Motorsports, the winner in the RealSimRacing Clash earlier this year. I know we say it's almost plate racing-esque, but it appears right now that Nick is out of line, stuck on the inside of the racetrack. And maybe as well just trying to take it easy at this point. No reason pushing the issue. And he's just going to stay down there on the bottom. Also got passed by Laraya. Nieto gets by. Now there goes Miller. There goes Zach Carr. There goes Brian Chambers. There's a reason why. Nick Barr is the only driver on the bottom. Is that draft line's up top? I mean, that is exactly how it would look, Nolan, if you got out of line at Daytona. You just lose a dozen spots in a lap or two. Very same thing here. He can't get in line. He doesn't have the draft. There may be an opening, a little bit of a half committal there, and because he didn't commit to it, Braden Whitaker sticks the nose to the outside, and Thomas George tucks in line behind him in the 9 car.
I think Thomas George might have gotten a little bit scared there, and I don't blame him. I honestly thought Whitaker was about to turn Nicholas Mara. That side, though, you saw Braden Whitaker have to back out to avoid slamming into the wall. That has allowed Matthew Mara to go through. Mara now tucks in line behind Nicholas Mara. We ride on board, of course, with Matthew Mara in his ever-classy virtual reality headset. No doubt, it's a bit of a journey for him right now as he's got a full view 360 of what's going on around him.
He's got the best seat in the house. You talk about these Mara entries and you know how they've been doing. It's been a tale of 2 different Maras, right? Nick Mara started 2nd. He is down 9 positions to 11th. But Matt Mara, who you rode on board with there, started 26th. He is up 14 positions to P12. So that's how the Mara Motorsports duo finds themselves together. Very different opening dozen laps to the race for each of those drivers. And you talk about how it's a 200-mile race to go by pretty quickly. Same thing at Daytona next week, at 80-lapper there. Under green, though, it could go by quickly, assuming you stay green. And based on just what we've seen on this sim, what the conversation has been, and even what I saw in practice, you know, these drivers talking about kind of how this setup makes you race. You know, we're only on a 12-lap run. This race, I think, can still and will have its share of yellows, but I just didn't think we'd be this spread out. And it's funny, I say this spread out. Your top 16 cars are within 2 seconds of each other, but it looks like they're minding their P's and Q's enough to not be forcing those 3 and 4 wide moments early that, listen, with this package, you could absolutely do, but it's not advisable this early, and I think these drivers are driving accordingly.
I couldn't agree with you more on that one. You know, you got to make sure that you can drive the car in accordance to where you're at presently in the race. Now, obviously, when it gets further towards the end of this race, we'll be seeing a lot more of the desperation moves being thrown, so to speak. But apart from all of this scrapping for position going on further in the tail end of this lead train here, it is still, you know, pretty civilized all the way throughout. You got around the top 10 or so that are all running line astern at the moment, and these guys battle each other further in the back. You can already see some small gaps starting to approach between themselves, particularly starting at Thomas George up to Brian Chambliss in 9th, and every time these guys go side by side through a corner, it hurts them just that little bit more.
On the inside there, it's Trudell who will lose a spot to Nick Mara there. Tucks up in line after the 7 car was the one stuck on the bottom. But that's the tricky thing here. Right up the road, you can see Sam Nieto's number 2 down to the bottom. This line goes high on the straightaways, low in the corners, right? That's just how you take the corner, high apex it, you enter high, you go through the corner low, you exit high again. If you are staying in line, you're not really going to be able to get to somebody's outside and try to make a move. So you're forced to go low to try to advance your position. but then if you can't slide up and find a hole, then you could drop backwards as we go 3 wide off of turn number 4. Lariah on the inside, up top there with the big push is the number 44 machine. No, it's Nieto, I should say, sorry. In the 2 pushing the 27 of Miller. Meat in that sandwich was the number 21 machine of Adam de Blasio. But it's almost funny that slide job, short track mentality of a pass, right? Pull out a line, overdrive the entry, slide up and block them, which is typically thought of as something you do at, half-mile racetracks, 3/4-mile racetracks, is something that you almost have to consider here at a 2-mile Michigan.
You saw just how much of a push that Jeremy Miller got into turn number 1 there. Not only was able to, jump a lot of the drivers out here like Nieto, but it was also able to completely clear Grant Davis in just about the 60 feet or so it took for him to turn into turn number 1. Did wash up a little bit to pull a bit of a slider, of course, on the number 24, but still was able to, get a really good head of steam through there and pull through and took up 3rd place. Now San Diego has got to hold that Zachary Carr wants to work with him. I don't think Carr wants to, though, as here in the turn, San Diego. Meanwhile, Lariah goes below the line.
He gave him a little bit of a shot to the left rear quarter panel. They fanned out wide. Look at the 21 machine tight in the center. Matt Barra get a split to the inside. Nick Barra to the outside. And Adam de Blasio will lose 2 spots in the corner. It may happen again. Trudell to his outside. And Kamer going to put the 8 car underneath. And de Blasio does pull up in line ahead of Braden Whitaker's 04 Chevrolet. He stops the bleeding, but he falls from P8 on the grid down to the number 13 spot. So a lot of fluid movement inside of these top 10, but it's basically kind of 6th position on the back. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 pulling away just a little bit. Divergent leading Winemaster, Miller, and Davis. 57 car up front has led every single lap. This sim seats 200 so far.
It's not a pleasant experience whenever you have to be tucked out of line to drop back. And I have to tell you right now, Matthew Bart is feeling the pain, trying to push up and maybe work with Adam de Blasio. No dice, though, for the number 23 car up front. Here is Seth DeMerchant losing the lead to Jared Winemaster, who pulls the slider off of turn number 2, takes up the lead. Jeremy Miller tucks in line with Grant Davis just behind. DeMerchant trying to run down the 40 once more.
Well, it just said that the Merchant had led every single lap, and Winemaster may not even get the lap led this time through. DeMerchant back underneath, but the run should be on the outside. They'll drag race to the line, lap led, and a bonus point to Jaron Winemaster with the 48 machine. Edged it up by 8 1,000, but here comes Miller as they went side by side for the lead. He went 3 wide now. He is real tight, though, on the entry to the corner. He almost went to the race lead. Now he'll slide up and block Davis to hang on to 3rd.
Oh, it's getting dicey up here. We're approaching that 1/5 mark in this race. And I'll tell you right now, these drivers are trying to race it as if it's, we're talking 10 to go. Not like we've still got 80 laps to go. Or 81 if you want to be really precise coming up to the line. DeMerchant retakes the lead. But look at how much of a run Jared Winemaster has. Seth DeMerchant is a sitting duck for the 48.
He has got nowhere to go in this battle up on the outside of the racetrack, so he holds his position, maintains it for the moment, and now DeMerchant back down over the white line, or the yellow line, I should say, just a little bit. Not necessarily something I would encourage doing, but decided that he wanted to be that much more aggressive. Doesn't really gain, doesn't really lose anything in that exchange. Your top 9 single file watching the battle for the race lead. Some stuff at the tail end of this lead group, which is 22 cars strong. Then there is a massive gap from the cars you're seeing on screen now back to everybody. Cody Harris 23rd on back, so 2 distinct groups right now as DeMerchant comes back on the inside and may now have finally cleared Winemaster. Have to slide up off of 2 to close the door. He does. Does Winemaster go for the crossover? Doesn't have a ton of speed, and he'll still stick the nose down to the inside and force the issue.
And DeMerchant tries to defend against him there, trying to move a little bit off of that wall and trying to tell him, don't you try to go for it. And now look at the side draft that DeMerchant's trying to pull with Winemaster off of turn number 4. I don't know if the 48 car will be able to do a whole lot about it, but with no help on the top side, Seth DeMerchant is going to lose the race lead. Miller opting to help out. the car racing designs machine down to the inside line. So teammates playing the system here.
Well, we always say Daytona Talladega, having an instant partner helps. Certainly here at Michigan as well, as DeMerchant now back underneath the number 27 Machida Miller. Miller going to get pushed by the 24 at Davis. The 26 of Carr going to hold in line up top, and now it's set to Merchant with no help down on the inside of the racetrack. If he can't find a spot in line here, he could end up with that Nick Mara treatment, with that 8 machine of Kyle Kamer treatment, where we saw them lose so many spots. He does find an opening, but Zach Carr continuing to be aggressive. He'll go underneath the 57. Now he'll look to put the slide job on as they fight into turn number 1 at a battle for 4th and 5th. But Seth did a real good job of winding up that corner. He'll even get a look to the outside of Davis for P3. What a run up top for the 57.
Tell you what, not a lot of people are wanting to help out Seth at the moment. He is kind of having to fight this battle all by himself. Miller's going to go outside. That allows DeMerchant with the shorter line around the bottom, but of course, Jim Miller will be able to get the overspeed off of turn number 4 and will be able to run down with the 57 car. I highly doubt that Jim Miller is about to help DeMerchant pass his teammate for the race lead, and sure enough, that is going to be the case. DeMerchant is going to have to once again fight this fight by his lonesome.
Yeah, he is going to have to fight it off. And listen, I can tell you from running with Seth in the IROC race last week at Chicago that he can race you hard, but he can make sure that he puts the race car exactly where he wants it. He's not going to run you over, but he's not going to give you any more room than he needs to. This time, back on the bottom. And again, we said that if these drivers really wanted to go like this, they could. They could race very aggressively, but they were just opting not to in the earlier half of this race. But it appears like they want to force the issue down. DeMerchant again gets to control, and the only thing left for Widemaster obviously is there's a bonus point for leading a lap. I believe only he and Seth have been drivers to lead at the stripe. Miller has gotten the nose in front at points, but I don't think actually had a lead lap counted in the bank, so that's not a bonus point. But you only get 1 lap for leading a lap and another single point for leading the most. DeMerchant's got the upper hand in this battle between these two now for the most laps led. But listen, Jared Widemaster, I'm sure, is relishing this opportunity to go head-to-head with a guy like Seth DeMerchant, right? An eNASCAR Road to Pro qualified iRacing Series driver, the Altus Esports stable, all extremely talented. You'll have his teammate Matt Danson to make it a return after serving a 2-week suspension next week at Daytona. So it may not be the most logical thing per se, strategy-wise, but these guys are relishing the opportunity to go toe-to-toe with a guy like Seth, and they're making him work hard. Seth tried the bottom again that time, washed up at a 2, Widemaster will clear, and the way they're going at it now leads me no indication that they're going to kind of settle this down anytime soon. They're having fun.
I'll tell you what, DeMerchant has, he's put on some very, very impressive performances, and obviously he has expressed that he certainly likes to run in the series, and it's good to have competition like this, even if you are, of course, that Road to Pro qualifier. It makes sure that you got to work for it. Right now, they are making sure that he's got to work for every single position out there, and he's almost being double-teamed here by the Car Racing Designs crew, and might even be triple-teamed there in a minute as you got Zachary Carr, another vehicle from that organization, the top 4, all from the Car Racing Designs crew, and the only driver not among them is the Logitech Altus Esports machine, driven by Seth DeMerchant. He's got no help with them, so it's impressive the fact that he's been able to put up such a strong fight as he's once again going to make a swap for the lead with Jared Widemaster, but they're making sure that he's going to have to work for this win if he's going to take it.
Well, there's always the duality of saying, the dirty air makes it difficult for cars behind you to pass, and that the race lead is an advantage. But that also, there's the issue that if you're up front, you're not drafted off anybody, so you can't really pull away, right? Those guys behind you are always going to have some draft, and it just appears, based on what the chatter was pre-race with some of the guys, that it's easier not to complete a pass. When I say complete a pass, I don't mean just clear somebody and get crossed over immediately. If somebody tells me complete a pass, I'm thinking, shut the door and kind of hang on to it for a little bit. Drivers thought it was going to be very difficult to pass, but look at this. Widemaster to the lead down. Miller underneath and goes back to the top spot. 57 and DeMerchant right back there. I mean, they are able to work hard, almost IndyCar-esque, in a battle for the race lead here at MIS so far, nearing the 1/3 distance in this SimC's 200. So these drivers, at least at this point, appear that they're able to put the race car where they want to.
being able to put the race car where you not only want it, but also need it is obviously a very crucial factor on being a good driver. And at the moment, Seth the Merchant knows where he wants the car, but he can't get where he needs the car, and that is back in line. You saw him drop 4 spots on just that straightaway alone. Currently trying to work with San Miedo, see if he can maybe push up on the inside of that number 2 car, but he's just not having the luck, and there's no space for himself and Kyle Trudell to get the nose in there. Trudell ripping the outside line, and now it's the Merchant's turn to receive the Nicholas Barr treatment and drop back, but it looks like Adam de Blasio will cut him a little bit of a break and help him back in line.
And no offense to Nick there, but I think that's just going to be referred to as getting Nick Amara for the rest of the race. It's not the person. He was just the first driver to get stuck in a line on the bottom. It's happened to dozens of drivers in this race. He was just the first one to have to deal with that towards the front of the field, and now will forever be known as getting Nick Amara. On board with Adam de Blasio in the number 8 spot, with side-by-side battle in front of him with Trudell up top, and the Merchant trying to not continue to fall back, try to kind of stymie this drop, but he'll lose more positions. 7th last time at the start-finish line, but now with de Blasio getting by, he'll go to 8th, and then Nick Mara, Matt Mara, doubled up on the outside, not going to give him room, and that's how easy it happens. You could be one of, if not, in Seth's case, probably one of, if not the fastest cars in the field, but if you get stuck at a line, you just can't make up for that. And with that, you got team cars working together, drafting. The 9 wants to come up, but the Merchant not able to get up in front of George. And Seth the Merchant could go from the race lead to outside of the top 10 here in a moment.
And the big problem that the Merchant has is that, oh my gosh, really giving Matthew Barr a bit of a squeeze there off of turn 4. But the problem that the Merchant is having, it's not even the fact that he needs, well, obviously he needs a guy to work with him, but the problem he has is that nobody wants to work with him. And for good reason, to be honest. It's not just the fact that he's, of course, Seth the Merchant that nobody wants to work with him. But the reason why nobody's wanted to cut him a break here is the fact that if they go down to get in line with him, it's going to be a little bit before they can work up any kind of positioning to get some time going. And in that time, they themselves, whoever works with them, is going to be losing about, we're talking 2, 3, 4, 5 places themselves. It just is not worth it to go down and help that one guy who's going to fall back, especially if you know he's going to be ended up at the tail end of the group anyway.
And there's also, what's on the line as we see Kyle Kamer drop back on the inside there on the front straightaway, and will pull up in line after getting passed by Thomas George. So Kamer sliding to 12th after starting this race for the outside of run number 2. Is what's on the line, right? There's X amount of drivers that are locked in with a win. There are X amount of drivers with wins that need to maintain a top 25 in points for that race win to count. There's a lot of drivers pretty safe on points, and then there's a lot of drivers who, are outside. Not a top 16 car, but at the same time, they aren't a sub-top 25 car. So they're in a position where if they win a race, they could be in the playoffs. Seth the Merchant is in none of those categories, right? Running a part-time schedule here to try to collect race wins, to kind of play the spoiler and put an Altus car in victory lane. That is the only objective for Seth the Merchant, is to win races here. And maybe the drivers who have a lot more on the line will be less inclined to work with a guy like that, because they're thinking, listen, I've got more skin in the game than he does. I'm not going to put all my eggs in that basket. And maybe that could be a part of the decision as you take a look at the different battles on track. Right, I mentioned that your top 15 cars had broken away or so. Now that is the number. It was once bigger, but your top 15 are in a breakaway. Andrew Freenage has not had a good night. He is in that secondary group, about 15 seconds off of the lead.
It honestly amazes me. I was about to actually touch on this as well, Evan, but the fact that Andrew Freenage is so far back is honestly a bit astonishing to me. He's one of those guys who has been so consistently good the past couple of months, and sitting 34th right now, completely stuck, unable to make moves. It's astonishing. Now, obviously, he did a set of qualifying laps, so he started all the way back in 39th place. So we kind of figured he'd have a bit of a hard time, but the fact that he's this far back, it does make you wonder a little bit. Now, of course, when you exit pit road, it's such a long pit road that has to leave for cars that, he was among those grouping that did not quite manage to catch up with the tail end of the field, but he did have a head start, that being said, coming to the line. So, again, you'd think he'd be able to make that jump, make up a couple positions. He just has not been able to do so. Another guy that I'm surprised to see back in this mix is Brandon Bowie. Started 5th place. He is down all the way in 32nd, and he's just a couple of cars up the road from Freenage in this same train. And now, Bowie's problem is the fact that he dropped out of line on lap number 1, and I think he was anticipating an early lap wreck, and he would just be able to breeze through and avoid all of it. That never happened. Now he is stuck back here, and there's no possible way for him to work his way back up to the leaders.
Well, the interesting thing, just to jump back onto that point about Frinash, is his last race win in this Cup Series was in May. At that point, it was his 4th win of the year, a string of winning 4 races in 5 weeks, but it hasn't won since May. You could argue that because he's been locked into the playoffs, he could be experimenting with new things. I'm curious, as a driver like a Seth the Merchant, who has advanced, into the second round of that Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series, if maybe he's devoted a lot of his RSR practice time to that, of course, trying to get to the Contender Series and a hopeful for the Coke Series next year, right? So there's all these external factors that could be a reason why Andrew Frinash hasn't seen RSR victory lane in about 3 months or so. But nothing will surprise me when we get to the playoffs and he just comes back, right? He goes on an absolute tear. He's got a way of turning it up when it matters the most. And for all intents and purposes, this is a throwaway race for Frinash. As we look back up at the race lead, again, this is your pack of 15 cars that is broken away, and Jeremy Miller is settled in for the race lead here at the moment. Is the Merchant getting a bit of revenge on Matthew Barr, the 57, back in line on the outside and walking his way back through into the top 5.
I think I kind of speak for both of us here, Evan. I thought we honestly would have had our first caution by now. We've already had a few close calls, most notably Eric de Blasio, the 11th car, back in the first 10 laps of the race with his massive slide through turns 3 and 4. That saw him go down to the apron. I'm a bit surprised he was able to keep it green for so long, but you got to feel the cars this tightly packed together. Now, obviously, if you're at a track like Daytona, it's not as difficult, so to speak. I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch of the means, but when you're running, pretty much single file and just got to sit in line and just kind of go with the flow, it's a lot easier to keep it stable. Whereas you have a track like Michigan, where you do have the multi-group racing, you do have to carry the momentum, you have to lift off, sometimes tap the brakes depending on where you are. It's much more of a technical track than I would argue Daytona ever was.
Yeah, and, Daytona, Talladega, those are always going to be special racetracks. They are really very different than anything else. But again, Michigan has changed a lot, right, just based on the package that we're running. And is much more of a diverse track, right? You've had to drive this track very differently over the years, I think more so than some of the changes we've seen in plate racing over the years as well. As DeMerchant will tuck in line to maintain a top 5 spot. And I'm starting to think strategy, right? I mentioned that in that Coke race last week, a lot of drivers were taking it easy early because they wanted to get to the magic number 50. If they could get there, make one pit stop, and go to the end of the race. Well, it would appear that everybody is aiming for that, right? We didn't see anybody but Stove Price, who came down 4 laps ago, come down at what I would think would have been the 2-stopper mark, right? If you're doing a 2-stop strategy at a 100-lap race, you're probably pitting towards lap 33. Then you can pit later at lap 66 or so, make it to the end on 3 pretty even stints, Nolan. So it looks like everybody looking to try to stretch it for a 1-stop race.
This is honestly kind of a topic I touch on quite a little bit, the 1-stop versus the 2-stop strategy, but I usually talk about this more on a road course race. And keep in mind, the principle goes the same on an oval track. When you're debating if you want to go for the 1 or a 2-stop, you have to keep in mind, are you able to make up that second pit stop time with that second stop? Because on the one hand, you're losing another 30, 40 seconds down on pit road. However, you are on fresh tires for longer. The problem on a track like this, you need to have a few partners come down with you. You're not going to do yourself any good by pitting by yourself. You're going to come out all by your lonesome. You're going to lose a heck of a lot more time than if you just came down with the rest of the pack whenever they came down. It's a game of chicken, to be honest, at this point in time. It's only going to take one guy to come down where everybody else is going to follow. And I have a feeling we're going to be seeing those drivers coming down really soon here, Evan. As Steve Durham, he made the call. He's coming in this time.
He was very vocal on the radio, said, I am coming down pit road this time. This is obviously short of the mark that you would need to get to be able to make this race at a 1-stop strategy. And I think it is pretty close to that number 50 on being the maximum, right? You can see somebody else down pit road that Sean Kalis behind is also in. I don't think drivers can pit at lap 40 and then do a 60-lap run to the end. I think you're going to have to be pretty close to midway in this race to make the 1-stopper work. So I'm not sure if those 2 cars have saved enough fuel to be able to do so. It's also worth noting that when Seth the Merchant was leading this race, not only he really couldn't save any fuel, right? Had the opportunity maybe to lift a little bit earlier into the corner. I've seen some drivers actually clutching and coasting the car into the corner over the last week on the sim to save a little bit of fuel. But as the race leader, with no draft support, you're not able to save any fuel. So now that DeMerchant's back in traffic, may not be the worst thing for him. And for Miller, maybe Miller's comfortable enough to lead right now because he had those opportunities to save fuel in the draft earlier. Because I'm not sure you could do full throttle as the lead car for 50 laps and that be a plausible fuel strategy.
And you talk about Seth DeMerchant, maybe wanting to get in line and save a bit of fuel. I don't think he is saving fuel because, you've seen him. He's been side by side with pretty much everybody in this top group here, really for the last 15 laps or so. He's not really saving a whole lot. And just the fact that he is not at the tail of the field tells me he is still pushing that car, trying to make the effort on going a bit longer, trying to see if he can at least put himself further up by the time he does have to come on in. It's going to be awkward, I have a feeling, though, for some of the guys on the outside line. They want to come down to pit, and Seth decides to stay out. That extra one, de Blasio. Adam de Blasio that is getting a little close for comfort there with the 57.
They are racing hard now, approaching the halfway point in this SimSeats 200. Still waiting on a vast majority of the field, including all of your race leaders, to come down for service. This is probably the most consecutive laps that Jeremy Miller has led up front as DeMerchant's up and down night continues, right? Got stuck at the bottom, nearly fell out of the top 10. When he got up to the outside, drove his way back to the top 5. Right now, he will force his way in front of the 7 of Kyle Trudell. All of that to defend position number 6, but funny, he worked so hard to get up top, Nolan, that he goes right back down to the bottom as the 5 car is over the radio saying that he will be coming down pit road, and so is DeMerchant at lap 46. Again, this seems a little bit shy. DeMerchant is headed down pit road. All the cars behind him are as well. The mid-pack, Tice, Burke, de Blasio, Yakes are all pitting, and one car off track and through the grass, but you're going to be all right, and now expect your lead pack to be in this time. So it was some of those cars, including DeMerchant from the lead pack, mid-pack cars pitted. Expect all of these race leaders here going into 3 to head to pit road, if not at least a majority of them.
Eric de Blasio, you mentioned a car went off track. I think he might have copped himself an unsafe pit entry penalty as well. So I have to keep an eye on that to make sure his pit stop does go long. Here comes everybody just about in the top grouping, or at least 5 of those 15 drivers that were out there, including your leader, Jeremy Miller, Jerry Weimerster, and Zachary Carr. All 3 of the car racing machines coming down pit road that were running up in the top 5 consistently. They just got to hope they can leave those to tail as they came on in. If they got guys splitting their grouping up, it might be a bit more difficult for them to work together.
Yeah, these drivers obviously on the older tires running a little bit slower laps, but you're right. I think that the key here isn't going to be the undercut. The key is going to be, can you leave pit lane in a group just as well organized as you enter the pit lane in a group, right? So that brings a lot of drivers down to the pit lane, but still a majority of cars have not pitted. And how about right now, Matthew Barra leading laps in the SimSeats RealSimRacing Cup Series. Kyle Trudell will lead that last time by. The number 7 machine stays out and gets there as well. So Barra not credited with the lap led at the moment, but awfully close. De Blasio going to go for the undercut. I heard Barra over the radio saying he's pitting. Kyle Kamer now radioing that he's going to pit, but this could be tricky. Watch out. You have slower cars who need to pit, but there are fast cars who just pitted trying to pass them right now in the corner. So you need to make sure everybody around you knows you are pitting. Mara is in, de Blasio is in, so 2 and 3 are in. A very clean pit stop for this group that also sees Lariah, Davis, and de Blasio enter for service.
Lap traffic is always a bit of a hazard on any oval race, especially when you start to consider, a lot of the guys further down in the field who are already slow even on fresh rubber compared to the guys out in the front. The problem doesn't necessarily come trying to pass in the corners. It's more when you try to pass around the inside of the corners, especially if they're coming in that time by, because then they have to go up close to the wall just so they can carry that momentum down to the pit entry lane upon coming down off the pit road once you get by them, assuming you can get by them in time instead of being doored by them on their way down.
And with more cars cycling out, more cars cycle in. Trudell, George, and Whitaker will come down pit road. There's cars, meanwhile, passing each other on the aprons. And who's going to end up in the lead after all of this? I believe that Seth the Merchant is the net race leader as they run right now. So that is how things currently look. Is that DeMerchant may be the driver who cycles through to the point. And it sounds like Matthew Mara may have been penalized for black flag. So is requesting race control to take a look. So a look will be made as Sam Nieto pits from the race lead.
Well, the unfortunate incident came. Matthew Mara, Adam de Blasio, side by side off of pit road, Evan. And unfortunately for Mara, de Blasio passed him on the inside. And because there's no room for Mara, he had to go up onto the racetrack, which therefore gave him the black flag for an unsafe pit exit. But it was either that or you get wrecked and get the penalty anyway. I mean, he didn't really have any other option.
And it has been cleared by race control that it was a situation where I mentioned that there were cars side by side on pit road. That was it. Here is the next big swath of drivers. Now, I mentioned, here's the replay. You'll see that is Mara's position. And then de Blasio is going to drive up the inside here. Probably should have just tucked in line. And right there, I mean, it's not egregious onto the racetrack, but those right side tires were over the yellow line. That is an automatic penalty in the sim. Race control has cleared that from Matt Mara. But, drivers coming in 46 and 47. I was questioning Olin, would that really work on fuel? Could you make that happen? All of these drivers who just pitted out absolutely can, because they were able to get 51, 52 laps or so. They are money to the end of this race. Agnel Phillip will come down pit road along with Andrew Farinash, and that is it. Everybody has now completed service. As I thought, Seth DeMerchant will cycle out to the race lead, tailed by Jeremy Miller, with Zach Carr, Jared Winemaster, and Brian Chambliss inside of the top five. But look at the breakaway that the top two have gotten all of a sudden.
That is the magic of green flag pit stops at a draft track like this. If you can time it right, you end up coming down with somebody that you think would be good to run with, you can end up getting yourself a lot of headway up there. And DeMerchant played that perfectly. What ended up happening there was Seth DeMerchant comes down pit road. Obviously, he's pretty much by himself, so he ends up coming out with no draft, but he's got fresh rubber to help him, kind of keep some speed up. Jeremy Miller, though, still going faster thanks to the draft. He comes down with his teammates, gets a faster pit stop than his teammates, though. That means he came out right behind Seth DeMerchant, so now Jeremy Miller has got to hope that Zachary Carr and Jared Wymaster, his own teammates, running third and fourth, about a second or so behind, that they're able to maybe close up the gap to help him retake that lead.
And that is going to be the tricky part now, is you're going to go from navigating large draft packs together to dealing with a little bit more of smaller groups, right? The advantage for DeMerchant and Miller about 1 3/4 seconds ahead of the drivers behind them. Now that every driver has cycled onto the pit lane, let's take a look top to bottom with 45 laps to go at MIS at your SimSeats midway race break. The dominant car of the night, Seth DeMerchant, started on pole and cycled himself back to the race lead. He leads a two-car tandem between he and Jeremy Miller, who sits in second at the moment. And then the next drafting duo between Zachary Carr and Jaron Winemaster. There they are, about 1.5, 1.6 seconds off of the race leaders. Carr third, Winemaster fourth. Brian Chambliss then 5 seconds off, leading a trio of drafting cars ahead of Nicholas Mara P6 and Kyle Kamer P7. And then another group of three about 6 seconds off of the race leaders includes Michael Loraya in 8th, Grant Davis in 9th, and Adam de Blasio. Nolan, our top 10 right now.
That will hold 11th place. Kyle Trudell, several seconds back the road, counted about 8.7. All the way back from Seth DeMerchant. Matthew Mara is going to be down in 12th place with Sam Nieto in 13th. That puts Braden Whitaker 14th with Thomas George in 15th. Eric de Blasio in 16th. Bradley Burke, an impressive 29th to 17th charge so far. Almost as impressive as Joseph Tyson's 31st to 18th at the time being, with Joe Yates going 32nd. Up to the 19th position. William Schmidt, one of the biggest movers on the day. 42nd place, dead last. He's rounded out the top half of the field in 20th.
And continuing on down now through the mid-pack, 20th position is going to be Schmidt, as you mentioned. He's ahead of Kaczynski by about 1 second. Then there's a big group of cars back here that all pitted at all different times. It's kind of the in-betweeners that are all mixed together. Liam Sheen, 22nd. Brandon Six is in 23rd, ahead of Dylan Jones and Steve Durham in the top 25. Look out! The 43 car nearly caused an incident. That was Kalis ahead of Eberhardt, 26th, Silver, 27th, Kalis, 28th, Casto, 29th, and Trevor Trigo rounds out the top 30.
That's going to put Chris Rabel 32nd with Brandon Bowie 33rd. Although David Washington just moved up to 32nd. That puts Eric Stanford 34th with Sean Kalis all the way back in 35th after his close call just one lap ago. Shane Parrish back at 36th with Agdal Phillip in 37th. Rhett McBride at 38th with Trey Brown and then Cody Harrison Brown down 39th and 40th. You got Stove Price Jr. Russ Cato, both 3 laps down. Stove Price Jr. currently in the garage.
That is a look top to bottom at your SimSeats midway race break. Since 2009, SimSeats has been designing and fabricating high-quality, made-in-the USA driving simulators, including motion systems, complete turnkey iRacing packages with custom fabrication. Their customer base includes all racers from the amateur to the pro ranks, and everyone on the SimSeats team is a weekend racer too. Their passion for racing drives them to build better sim racing equipment. Join SimSeats for the thrill of racing at any car, at any time, I should say, in any car and on any track by visiting sim-seats.com to learn more information. Proud title sponsor of the SimSeats Real Sim Racing Cup Series. So now that we've gotten through the pit cycle and spread them way out, the question turns to fuel. Seth the Merchant is the driver who pitted the earliest. Both he, Eric de Blasio, Bradley Burke, Joseph Teisel pitted about 14 laps ago. Only Michael Kaczynski I'm seeing, and Steve Durham and Sean Kalis pitted even earlier than that. Kaczynski pitted 15 laps ago, and then for Durham and Kalis it was about 18. We have 40 laps to go this time by. I just don't know if anybody who pitted, say, prior to lap 48 could make it. Because what's the furthest we saw people go, right? 51, crossing over to 52. Some of those drivers were saying on the radio, Nolan, that they were actually running out of fuel heading into their box. So if 52 is the maximum, then DeMerchant, Miller, Carr, Winemaster, in theory, are going to be short and need to save a little bit extra.
It could make it a very entertaining fuel mileage race. And now, oddly enough, Michigan has strangely, at least in my experience in iRacing, been quite the fuel mileage track. And a fuel mileage race here is always entertaining. I'll never forget one finish, saw the guy run out of fuel, turn 2, had to go all the way around through 3 and 4, and just got pipped about 100 feet before start finish to finish second place in the race. So you can get some pretty entertaining fuel mileage finishes, especially if you end up running out of fuel on that white flag lap. You can coast it around and potentially win if you got enough time and space. Seth the Merchant, though, I'd argue is not one of those drivers that has a lot of space to work with in the event of running out of fuel.
And by leading, remember I was talking earlier how I think by leading and not having to draft, it's going to be more difficult for you to save fuel. In some respects, you can always clutch it. That's an option. Coast, yeah, but you can't use the draft to your advantage. In theory, leading would make it more difficult. So it'll be interesting to see as the second half of this race goes on if somebody like a Seth will actually, kind of give up the race lead or not fight for it too hard and just tuck in line. You're taking a look at all of the mid-pack action. Liam Sheen and company. This is from about 25th position on back. And again, that equates to about a 20-second interval. A lot of these drivers pitted most recently and would be much safer on fuel than the cars up the road from them, as you see the perspective from Brandon Six.
I do find it a bit interesting here that we had such a tightly knit field that was battling so close together, about first on back 15th place. That train is basically non-existent at this point, and we're left with the grouping from about 23rd to about let's say about 35th place, which honestly, it was close, but it wasn't as close as it is right now. I find it interesting now. It's kind of flip-flopped a little bit, from the front being all bunched up to that the back is being all bunched up, but the front is a little bit more spaced out. It does kind of make you wonder, how things can just switch around like that. As there goes six on the beautiful outside pass on Dylan Jones.
I was talking earlier about how it's hard to make passes up top, but a nice, well-executed move with that time through. That's going to put the 66 of 6 up to the number 24 spot. That's 10 positions gained since the start of this SimSeats 200. And I don't know if there's bonus points for helmets, Nolan, but that is one of the more creative ones I can say that I've ever seen here on the service.
Are we not going to acknowledge the race suit itself? I mean, it's a pretty good combination.
Is it a clown suit?
It is. At least I think it is.
Oh, boy. Well, as long as they're not driving like clowns on the racetrack, your suit and your helmet can be whatever you want it to be. And no shock that's the car that's got it as well. Quite the character that matches the car as well, I think, to a certain extent. So that is the onboard perspective there. 6 with Silver, Jones, Casto, some of the other drivers in and around this group of race cars. And this is not, I think, Nolan, fair to say, the race that we were expecting to have tonight at Michigan, right? You still have the elements of what we mentioned, right? It's hard to get away. There's drivers separated in the packs. But if you had, asked me $20 if we're having a yellow or if we're not having a yellow, I would have put 120 on at least 1-2 yellows in the first half of this race. Who knows what the next 34 laps have in store, but it has been quite impressive that the way that this race has developed into a strategy game and a fuel mileage race.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, it's a bit of an interesting factor when you take a look at it. The fact that it has been so incredibly clean, especially when you compare it to how some of the other races have been. I mean, you look at Charlotte earlier on this year, now obviously a very different track, but you put that same group of guys on this track and you'd think it'd be about the same story, but that has not been the case. These guys have been absolutely phenomenal today. And it's not to say that, crash makes the race interesting. It's been good racing, and it still is good racing. It's been absolutely fantastic what we've been seeing all throughout the course of the day. And in fact, it kind of reminds me a lot of what some of the the Coca-Cola eNASCAR series are like, actually, Evan. Particularly when you look back at Daytona, you get a lot of the battles taking place all throughout the field, but the race can go caution-free. And then, of course, it all falls apart on the last lap, but that's just how draft tracks tend to be.
And of course, like a draft track, if you have, you can have a clean race to the end, but all it takes is one, right? One yellow, one restart, and then really who knows what's going to happen from that point on to the end of this race. As you're looking off of the back and looking back to the duo with Agnew, Phillip, and company. So I think that's the bumper of, is it Liam Sheen we're looking off of the back of? And the one, yes, it is Liam Sheen in the number 1 car. Race winner from Watkins Glen gets himself into a playoff position, a courtesy of the win. But I mentioned there's some drivers whose work isn't done, and let's kind of explain that a little bit, Nolan, right? The playoffs are seeded by wins and then by points. Liam Sheen is a winner, so he's in, but you need to maintain a top 25 position in points for a race win to count towards playoff eligibility. That is notable for Daniel Eberhardt, who enters tonight 22nd in the points. He's running 21st. Stay the course. He should be fine. But even more so for Liam Sheen, right? 24th in the points. He needs to stay higher than Mariusz Leszczynski, who comes into tonight 26th. Liam Sheen's advantage over Mariusz headed into tonight was, I think, 18 points. So if Liam Sheen could just have a decent night, same like Daniel Eberhardt, it's fine, right? But obviously they want to pad that advantage with Daytona being next. I think if it was a more normal track, 18 points would feel a lot more comfortable headed into that week. But because it's Daytona, those guys really want to pad that points bubble above 26th so that they have a little bit of leeway in case stuff gets out of control at Daytona, because if they drop out of the top 25, those race wins will not count towards playoff eligibility.
And now, of course, with Mariusz Leszczynski being a no-show today, now Liam Sheen has one less driver to worry about. So at the moment, the driver's got to worry about the most is actually Jaron Weinmaster. Weinmaster, of course, he is currently sitting 27th in points. The gap between them 22 points. I would also like to point out Liam Sheen, Presley City 28th, Wymester all the way up in 4th. It is a huge points gap on track at the moment for the 48 car and the number 1. I can almost guarantee you that's making Sheen a little bit nervous at the moment.
Well, some drivers, Rhett McBride, not really happy that the Trey Brownie to Bashid was giving him a push. He says, please do not wreck me for 90th position, running 37th and 38th. Trey clarified, hey man, I'm just trying to push you to help us out, but Brett's saying, listen man, we made our bed. We're 30 something seconds on for the race leaders. Pushing for 37th can only accomplish so much. As you take another look at Brandon Bowie. Bowie's been one of the drivers who has struggled the most over the course of this race, aside from Ross Cato, who started 7th and runs in 40th position at the moment. Bowie has gone way down the gutter from 5th to 30th. So the night has just not played out for Bowie, who has been, in the last month and a half, one of the best drivers. Brandon Bowie, a winner of 3 of the last 6 races.
But it's like I mentioned earlier, there is one reason why he's fallen back so far, and that was because he was too forgiving on that first lap. Like we talked about, it's not uncommon at some draft tracks like this one for drivers to kind of poke their nose out of line, fade a little bit deeper into the field. So if a wreck happens up in front for everybody driving like it is the last lap, on lap, let's say, 8 out of 100, then, you know, you're clear of the wreck. You can just slowly slow down, make up some free spots there. But he fell all the way to the tail end of the field, and now he is struggling to even keep himself in, 20th down to 30th place. He's turning 3 wide with Liam Sheen and Agno Phillip trying to squeeze him into the middle. So going to show that Bowie is struggling greatly, which is a shame because he has a top 5 cars. He makes a bit of contact with Sheen, but he's just not been able to get his way back up there to fight for those positions that he could probably go for.
And Agno Phillip, another one of the interesting stories, right? In the non-weighted points, he's 11th position. But when you weight it with wins factored in, Agno finds himself much higher up, right? Courtesy of the race that he had earlier this year, he goes up to P6 in the standings. So Agno is somebody who has benefited from a race win, but it's a playoff car regardless. He's going to have to look for the next step. And here is big news. Your race leader, Seth the Merchant, down pit road at lap number 75. And sometimes, Nolan, sometimes I know what I'm talking about when it comes to fuel. And I had kind of been suggesting I don't think he can do it. He pitted too early. He's not saving fuel. And that confirms it there. Seth the Merchant down pit road. He had pitted 29 laps ago. He cannot go to the end of this race. It may seem like an early call, right, to not try to push it for a yellow. But he has understood he can't make it out of the 95. Machine Bradley Burke also saying he is coming down pit road. The 5 car of Joseph Tice saying that they are coming down pit road. All of these cars pitted 1 lap after Seth DeMerchant did. If that means that they can't make it, Thomas George pitting, who was on pit road only 26 laps ago. If you can't make it down pit road having pitted 26 laps ago, there are not many cars on the lead lap who can. And that's why I was saying I really thought you had to get to halfway. This could come down to like a half a dozen cars who can make it.
Oh my gosh, I mean, I'm a bit speechless. Not only does Seth DeMerchant miscalculate on the fuel, but he lost a lot of time in pit road just by himself. Even if the rest of the field comes down to pit road, he is not going to be able to get back up to the lead. Reason being, had to repark the car twice in his box because he overshot, misjudged it trying to back up once, didn't back up enough, so had to move back again. Probably lost a good 10 seconds just setting the car in the box alone. So he is going to be, we're talking all the way down, probably top 10th place at best if everybody else in the top 10 comes on down pit road as well.
The big shock there for me is George, because the drivers who had pitted, lap number 46, 47, I can see it. But Thomas George had pitted just shy of the halfway point there. And I'm going to go back to double check this just because I want to confirm what lap that number 9 machine was down pit road. Just looking back at his lap intervals, and I'm doing it now, he pitted at the end of lap 50, crossed it over to 51. So I don't know if he used too much fuel as Liam Sheen now comes down pit road, if he had to be more aggressive. One other thing to consider, Nolan, is because we're no longer in a big 15-car pack, all these cars could simply just be using more fuel in groups of 2 or 3.
Right, that's true. You know, before it was really only the one car up in the lead that was using all of this, but when you get, you know, all these guys here that are running, you know, all by themselves in these 2-3 car groups, you do use a heck of a lot more fuel in these machines than you might want. So it probably could very well be a case that a lot of these guys up in the front, they could have had enough fuel to make it to the end had they still been in the larger train. As they came in so spaced apart, that never happened. As such, these guys have just shot themselves in the foot, potentially, as Stove Price Jr., if I read that right, might have made a quick lap on the race.
I just surprised, the George one surprised me because, again, he literally pitted at halfway. So if he could have just replicated his first run, he would have been good. So that's why I think the field size is critical. I think how aggressive you're fighting is critical as well. So there is a lot to consider late in this race. So if we assume that those drivers couldn't make it, as Matthew Marr now comes down pit road as well, then there is no way that Jeremy Miller, Zach Carr, Jaron Weinmaster, Nick Marr, Brian Chambliss, I mean, half of these top 10 cars, there's no way that they could make it. I think you get a lot more interesting when you look at a guy like Lariah, right? 32 laps on the tires, 19 to go. He'd have to push it to 51. That's doable. Sam Nieto only would have to go, I think, 49 laps. He's running in 7th position. And then you got Andrew Freenosh, talking about him not being a factor, Nolan. He's the next safest driver. His run would only have to be 48 laps. And he is riding back in the number 12 spot. So this is very interesting, as Grant Davis says that he is coming down pit road. He will give up the number 8 position on the racetrack.
Now, more crucial for guys like Freenosh is they have been
top
running.
3.
There you go. You called it.
Miller, Carr, Weinmaster. There's just no way. And look out, a spinner. It's the 25 of Brian Chambliss. Thankfully, there is no caution, but that's really going to hurt him because he locked it up a little bit coming onto the pit lane. Listen, the race win may be gone, but there are so many cars, Nolan, that need to top off that you could still be fighting here for a top 10 spot in this race. And Brian Chambliss just threw away a handful of positions with the time that he gave away on that mistake.
I'll tell you what, Michael Lariah is probably changing his race suit while he's in the base of this, because watch this, on pit road, trying to keep it out of the 44 car, and then just locks it up and slides it in. Thankfully, does not make any contact with the 44 car. I see the 40 of Nicholas Barr coming down to pit road. And now you got guys like Sam Nieto, Cameron Trudell, etc. that are up in the lead, but look at Freenosh, up to 6th place. Now, the crucial thing about Freenosh and his group, they've been running in a big group of cars so far the entire race, even through the pit stop cycle. So they have been able to save the fuel that they might just need to make it to the end.
Freenosh, along with, I'm just looking at the numbers here. It's turned into the numbers game. Freenosh, Phillip, McBride, and Browning all were the last cars to pit and will have the shortest of the stints necessary to make it to the end of this race at the 48 to 49 lap range. So that is the drivers who would be the safest. But again, I don't think that there's any way that Kamer can do it. I mean, Nieto would have to push it. But again, we've seen drivers do 51. The question is, you mentioned that Freenosh and other drivers have been able to find a pack. I mean, did these guys in the middle of the pack find an opportunity to save? And the advantage of, the sim, and I was talking with Steve Letard about this last week, Nolan, is that in real life, you know pretty much down to a science as a crew chief how much fuel you have in the car just based on what's left in the can, right, after the pit stop. iRacing takes a lot of that guesswork out, right? These drivers, if they have a crew chief or not, have the actual data. This is exactly how much fuel you have left. iRacing's sim will tell you in the car how much fuel it thinks, or how many laps you can go on fuel it thinks you could make. You could also have an external software like I use with JRT, which kind of, I think, averages this out a little bit more based on actual fuel consumption, right? If I'm running this hard, This is how many laps I can go on fuel. So that's why, when DeMerchant pits with 25 to go, you're thinking, well, he couldn't have stayed out. I might have stayed out a little bit longer to try to get a yellow, right? But they're doing that because there is no gray area, right? They're not trying to see, at 5 laps to go, how are we looking? These guys all, for the most part, know if they're going to make it or not. They have the data.
And I can't agree with you more on that one. I mean, you got all the information you need, even without the external resources that you can use, like SimRacing, MCRT, etc. But then, of course, you get the factor that then people are going to ask, why come down? Why not, wait for a caution? Well, the fact is, we're now 87 laps into this thing. We have not even gotten close to a yellow since the first 10 laps when Eric de Blasio had his massive slide down to the turn 4 apron. Even that wasn't necessarily close because he saved it in just a couple of seconds. So it's safe to say, based on this trend, a caution is a bit far-fetched to think about at the moment. I mean, that is, unless Sean Castle and Brandon Bowie decide to get a little bit closer off of turn number 4. So I think they're just thinking, we know at this point, a caution's probably not going to happen. Let's come down pit road. We'll stop now about halfway through the stint, and we'll try to just make up that time on fresher tires when we still have time that we can make up. The problem for them is there's not enough time for them to try to regain all of their lost ground, even on fresh rubber.
Yeah, the decision for somebody like a merchant is like, listen, if I pit with 5 to go, I'm not going to get any benefit from those tires, right? I mean, you could do a splash to go, but, to your point, he's mentioning, I'm not going to make it. I'll split it in half, and while everybody else is trying to tiptoe to the end to see if they can make it, I'm accepting I'm not. I'm going to get the fresh rubber now, and I'm going to be the best finisher of the drivers who can't make it, which could be most, if not maybe even all, of the field. So just keep that in mind. Of the drivers who have been forced down pit road for fuel for a second time, Seth DeMerchant leads that group of race cars. He sits in 18th position at the moment. I just have to feel like there's got to be one driver at least in those top 17 right now that can make it. You can see the 52 with Casto pretty slow down the back straightaway, being pushed by Bowie. This group of cars here, all right, this is a huge battle, 10-car battle, 5th through 14th position. This is some 12 seconds off of the race leaders, where Nieto leads Kamer, Trudell, and de Blasio 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can see the intervals left-hand side. It starts to creep in just a little bit, but those cars up front also have a lot more room to work with, Nolan, to save. You mentioned that they're clutching and coasting. Well, they got 12 seconds to burn. They could almost save a second per lap now, since we're inside of 11 laps to go.
The only problem, of course, is if they happen to run out of fuel on that last lap, they're going to quite a bit slower than I think they would like. So it is a fuel game at the moment, and this really has turned into a fuel mileage race. The guys at Sam Nieto, Kamer, Trudell, and de Blasio are asking right now is, do we have enough fuel to make it to the end of this race? I don't think they're a bit certain about that because they are clutching and coasting so much. All of these guys back here, 5th on back, they are not. Look at Eric Stanford trying to rip the outside groove of this one, trying to push around Castells. You take a look up on board. There's Liam Sheen going around the outside. This is at the top 4. That's Kyle Kamer right up in front. Sheen certainly is not backing down. He's trying to retake a lap and get himself back up and finish this race on the lead lap at the very least.
There is a lot of drivers fighting for a lot of different things on the racetrack right now. Sheen has passed Sam Nieto to get back onto the lead lap. That means 32 cars still on the lead lap, 39 cars still in this race of the 42 that started it. Now inside, though, of 10 laps to go from Michigan in a fuel strategy extravaganza. You can see the 7 of Kyle Trudell ahead of de Blasio, trailing Kamer and Nieto. Of these 4, Nieto has the least amount of laps on his fuel, right? He pitted 41 laps ago. Kamer pitted 43 laps ago. So did de Blasio. Trudell pitted 42 laps ago. I think a lap is a pretty significant difference based on what we've seen with 8 laps to go. Again, Nieto would have to go 50 laps. Trudell would have to go 49. Kamer, de Blasio would only have to go 48. And then again, a big step to Brandon 6. Daniel Eberhard, Andrew Friedosh, 5, 6, and 7. Those drivers in the 46 to 47 lap range on a run. So there is a lot to be decided. Joe Yakes has to make the call. He is down to pit road for service. It looks like we're in the range of about 16 or so cars have yet to pit a second time.
One driver has turned to the wick a little bit this time for Adam de Blasio. Not clutch and coasting this time round through turn number 1. Makes the pass on Kyle Trudell. Goes up to third. Now is de Blasio switching back into fuel conservation mode. We'll have to see around here coming into turn 3. And he does. So de Blasio just wanted a little bit of extra power, put himself onto the podium. We're getting that hammer down and trying to run down the top 2 once more.
And this time by 6 laps to go from Michigan International Speedway. Sam Nieto continuing to lead at the moment. Looking off at the back of the race leader. Listen, I mean, he is out of the gas and he is clutching and coasting for quite some time, right? We talked about, well, what are these drivers fighting for, right? What is on the line for the drivers up towards the front of the field in this race? Well, you're talking about a guy like a Sam Nieto. He does not have a race win. He is a bubble driver, right? He would love to get a race win here tonight and secure his place in the championship. He entered tonight, I believe, 14th in the standings of the 16, right? That's within that kind of danger zone that I don't want to be sitting on headed to a race like Daytona. And so much off throttle time for all of these lead cars. Even somebody, like an Adam de Blasio in a similar position, I believe, Nolan. He comes into tonight on the outside looking in. A win could do it for him. I mean, all those drivers who really need a Hail Mary performance. Kyle Kamer outside of the top 16, in the top 25. He sits in third. I mean, all 3 of your top 3 cars right now could punch a ticket to the playoffs with a race win right now.
4 laps remaining. De Blasio is certainly not clutch and coasting as much as Sam Nieto is. He is running down that number 2 car slowly but surely. The only problem with de Blasio is he is also using that little bit more fuel. He's been doing so the last 5 laps. He did this strategy so he could get past third place of Kyle Kamer. He did it to get past Kyle Trudell. He's trying to do the same to get past Nieto now. The one problem is that could be the deciding factor. So many times have we seen, over the last decade or so, even over that ours has been around, where drivers have pushed a little too hard and they have paid the price by running out of fuel when it really mattered.
Sam Nieto and Adam de Blasio both looking for first career wins in the SimSeats RealSimRacing Cup Series. So not only would it be a huge story to get to the playoffs, but what a huge story to finally break through and get a win in one of the hardest leagues and the most competitive leagues on the iRacing service. De Blasio is on the bumper of Sam Nieto for the race lead. They have pulled away 1 second over Kyle Kamer, still sitting third. Kyle Trudell still sitting in fourth. There is some lap traffic ahead. They may have to deal with some of it as it is 2 laps to go for Sam Nieto.
Just 2 remaining. Nieto still has the lead. De Blasio falling back a little bit. Now starting to use more and more lap traffic as a pick. Third place, Kamer and Trudell both dropping back like stones. We're talking 150 miles an hour out of turn 2. They are just struggling to finish this race, let alone fight each other.
And it is important to keep in mind that Kamer dropping back, saving fuel, pitted on the same lap that Adam de Blasio did. So was de Blasio able to save more, or is he going to come up shy? This time, white flag in the air, 1 lap to go. Sam Nieto, Adam de Blasio trying to hang on as the 21 car still plastered on the deck lid.
Blasio trying to run down Nieto. He's going to have one more shot. That's going to be turn 3. If he can throw it up the inside, might get him here. Nieto slow off a 2.
And he's going to throw a block to the inside. They touch. De Blasio underneath Nieto. There was small contact. They stay on track to the inside. Side by side. Adam de Blasio shuts the door on Sam Nieto. He'll get his first career SimSeats Cup Series win and punches his ticket to the postseason.
What a battle there. Somehow Adam de Blasio make that work in the last corner on the last lap. Probably running on fumes right now in the 21 machine. All the other drivers starting to work their way across the line. Car spins it after the start-finish line. But it's going to be a clean finish all the way throughout the grid.
49-lap run to the end for Sam Nieto, but the story is Adam de Blasio, who makes it last 51 laps. Saved enough fuel. You could tell that he was waiting, right? I mean, he sat on the bumper of Sam Nieto lap after lap after lap. And then finally, on the white flag lap, tried to make the move down in turns 1 and 2. Two cars saw it coming, went down, shut the door on him. And then when they tried it again, off it into turn number 3, there was nothing that Sam Nieto could do. De Blasio chopped him a little bit, and I am guessing that that race car is out of fuel on the start-finish line. Adam de Blasio, in career start, I believe, number 18 in the SimSeats RealSimRacing Cup Series, at least this time through, has took home the checkered flag, and that's it. Celebrating on the front straightaway. Let's watch the last lap from on board the 21.
See that 10th Mountain Division number 2 machine struggling to stay out in front, no doubt, trying to go with everything he has off of turn 2. De Blasio goes low, Nieto tries to block and just vaults over the left rear quarter panel.
And then down into 3, he's got the position to get the apron there and slide up just a little bit. I mean, Sam Nieto's not going to be happy about the touch, Nolan, but I think at that point it was pretty clear. 21 was the faster of those two cars. Waited to the end of the race to make the pass. And Adam de Blasio gets the checkered flag in just his 18th career start in the SimSeats RealSimRacing Cup Series, and just a week removed from when Liam Sheen did it. Adam de Blasio is the 80th different winner in RSR Cup Series history. Let's take a look at your SimSeats full race results tonight for the virtual Michigan International Speedway. De Blasio gets the win by 1 second over Sam Nieto. Kyle Trudell comes home in 3rd. We do our very best to chat with all of those drivers in just a moment. Kyle Kamer, Brandon 6, the top 5, with Daniel Eberhardt, Brandon DeBowie, Nick Silver, Chris Rabel, and Sean Casto, the top 10.
11th place will hold Jeremy Miller, a driver who we thought was going to be good to win this race, but fuel issues catches him out outside of the top 10. Andrew Freenosh does manage to recover up to the 12th position as a result of all of the fuel struggles, but that now Phillip down in 3rd place. Zachary Carr in 14th. Jaron Weinmaster 15th, with Seth DeMerchant down in 16th. Michael Araya 17th. Grant Davis, Trevor Trago, and Nicholas Morrow round out the top half of the field.
And continuing on through, Thomas George finishes in 21st position ahead of Bradley Burke and Joseph Tice. Braden Whitaker, Shane Parrish, Eric de Blasio, Liam Sheen, and William Schmidt finish on the lead lap in your top 28 ahead of Dylan Jones in 29th and Rhett McBride in 30th.
31st holds Trey Browning with Eric Stanford, Matthew Marr 32nd and 33rd, Michael Kuczynski in 34th with Sean Kalis in 35th, Joe Yakes in 36th place with Cody Harris in 37th, Brian Chambliss in 38th, Ross Cato finishes 39th, the last driver to finish the race. That, of course, leaves David Washington, Steve Durham, and Stove Price Jr. 24, 34, and 46 laps down respectively, all three taking it to the garage.
They're in the ballpark of 15 to 20 cars were able to make it to the end without a second trip down to the pit lane. But the driver that ended up on top of it all is the number 21 machine of Adam de Blasio. He is a first-time winner in the SimSeats RealSimRacing Cup Series this year, Adam, and it is a critical timing on this race win for you with the playoffs looming large. And with Daytona coming up in 1 week's time, you go from a bubble driver to a driver locked in to the playoffs in 2021. How's it got to feel?
Oh, man. What a relief that is. I've had probably the roughest year ever on sim racing in my life. And it finally a race played out in my favor where I actually did NIS Sunday night, and I knew that it was going to be a one-stop strategy if you save fuel. So that's what I had on mind, and that's what I ended up doing.
You come down to the pit lane at the end of lap number 49, crossing over to 50. We saw some drivers go 51, 52 laps in the first stint, but nobody was able to go that far on the second stint. There are guys that pitted after you did that weren't able to make it on fuel. You are the only driver to go 51 laps to the end of this race. A couple of drivers did 49. One driver did 50. You were the only driver to do 51 laps to the end of this race. What was the process like trying to save that fuel while chasing Sam there and trying to make it last to the very, very end?
Coming out of pit lane, I knew I had to catch a group of cars, and once I caught the group of cars with Kamer, one of the Morrow brothers, and I forgot the third one, and then Loriah and Grant were also leading that pack. When I saw I pit on lap 49, I'm like, this isn't good enough. I was like, I raced too hard the first stint, and I'm like, I'm really gonna have to save a bunch on the second stint. So the moment I caught those cars, I did not race at all until like 7 to go. I started leapfrogging one at a time just to stay behind Sam, and I was saving until like coming to the white flag off from 4. Going through 3 and 4, coming to the white flag was when I started going, actually, and I actually ran out on exiting 2 on the cooldown lap.
How long did it take for you to know that you were good on fuel, right? I mean, normally in a fuel strategy race, in a fuel mileage race, you'll have guys going to, 5 to go, and then they'll start kind of diving off. We saw a lot of drivers kind of recognize early in this one, hey, I'm short, right? I mean, Seth the Merchant up front pitted with some 25 laps to go in this race. When did you really know that you were going to be able to make it?
When I crossed the line for the checkered flag. I said to myself, I am not going until I get the white flag. And when that happened, I went to check my F3 to see how much fuel I had left, but I didn't do that. I was more focused on racing Sam at the end. And I just, when it comes to the fact that I didn't save good enough that first stint and knew I had to go hard on saving the second stint, I will not go until like the white flag or 2 laps to go. Like, I will be that disciplined with myself, because partly I'm mad at myself for not saving more fuel on the first stint.
Well, you entered tonight as the first driver on the outside looking in, 17th on the playoff grid, needing a race win. You get exactly that, and you shuffle everybody else down the line. Not only is this win so important for you, right, but it's just your second top 10 of the season of race winners. That is the lowest number. So how can you take this momentum of having been able to win a race on strategy, on speed, and translate this into a real good shot into the championship?
Well, I absolutely love racing Andrew Freeners. He's one of the ones that got me into this league, and I've raced him for probably 4 years, where we'd be 1-2, whether it was me or him. And he said, hey, come on over here and give me a run for my money, basically. Think I'll do more NIS races to figure out the track, because I've been super busy with the first part of the year with tax season. Can't really do much there since I do accounting, and it's basically overtime every single week. And over the summer, I was busy with other things and didn't get to practice at all, really. My first laps on the track were when I loaded into the sim each week. But if skipping Daytona, because Daytona, who knows what's going to happen there. Super happy I don't have to worry about Daytona. I personally absolutely hate plate racing. I'd rather race road courses all day, every day. But Darlington is my favorite oval track. And hopefully the momentum, like you said, continues on to the first round of the playoffs.
We look forward to seeing how these playoffs kick off for you, the 21 team, and your 15 other competitors in 2 weeks' time. But at least for tonight, here from Michigan International Speedway, Adam, you're a race winner in the SimSeats Real Sim Racing Cup Series, and you are headed to the championship. Sponsors, shout-outs, all those good folks. Now is your chance. Who do you want to say hi to?
First off, I want to thank Dynamic Motorsports, my team that is for Road to Pro, which I got to a certain point, and like I said, accounting just ruined that chance. I had no time, and I just had to withdraw from Road to Pro. They're an awesome group of guys. If I start naming names, I know I'll forget one, so I won't. And then my unofficial teammates in here, Trevor Trigo, Joseph Yakes, and Eric de Blasio, my brother. Would like to thank them for being awesome friends. On my car, there's a 73 sticker. Don't know if it's big enough or if it's ever been noticed, but earlier this year we lost Jason K. Miller, longtime crew chief of Tyler D. Hudson, and also a great friend and teammate. And I want to mention that we miss him, and I will forever probably run that sticker on the car. And the other thing I have on my car on a little more funny, joking manner is the black cat, which is actually my cat named Cupcake. She usually watches me race, and then she knows when the race is over, and she usually wants dinner or treats afterwards, and she's right next to me right now. But I also want to thank you for broadcasting, and the other broadcaster, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, for broadcasting this league and putting on this league. It's definitely fun, and look forward to racing the rest of the year out and talking with you guys much more in the future.
Looking forward to it, and Adam, appreciate you sticking around and chatting with us post-race and this one. Again, congratulations on this race win. Looking forward to see what you can do with this chance in the playoffs. So best of luck. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep, thank you.
The race winner tonight from Michigan International Speedway. We'll pass things down to the opposite end of this battle. Sam Nieto was so close to the race win. Instead, he has to survive one more week before his playoff fate is certain. You are trackside with tonight's P2 finisher.
Indeed, I am, Evan. Sam Nieto joins me up in the broadcast booth now. Sam, 1 second behind out of de Blasio at the line. I would say, though, that's not really a representative of just how close that really was on that last lap.
No, I was. No, it was. I should be in victory lane right now. I choked coming out of 2. I'd been, clutching the whole second half of the run and was just out of a rhythm whenever it was time to go. I caught some dirty air and probably just got on the gas a little too soon. Adam got a run on me. I tried to throw a block. It was a little late, so I had to bring it up. And then Adam just, threw it in there, down there on the apron. I was looking good, but, he decided that he would wreck me and live with the consequences. So, he cleared himself and he won the race, and I'm P2.
But take a look at the fuel strategy. Of course, that was a big talking point of the second half of the race. One driver comes down, then another and another. What was the strategy that kind of helped you to stay out there for the remainder of the race instead of, coming down with the others?
About halfway through the first run, I decided, I wasn't going to try to get up there and race because you couldn't go anywhere. This kind of racing is just awful. I mean, I'm going to channel my inner Andrew Freenage here and just talk about how bad this racing is. It's not fun. It's intense, but for the wrong reasons. But yeah, I decided just to save fuel, and I think I thought everybody else was, because the runs were just so huge, and I was lifting going into one, halfway between the flag stand and the entrance to turn 1. So I was able to make it to like lap 53, and then from there it was just I knew I was going to make it, and did the required saving to do so.
Well, you've got, obviously, the next race at Daytona. You've obviously expressed how much you're not a fan of the plate race scene, but the first race of the playoffs is Darlington. Now, being ninth in points, it's safe to say you're pretty set for the playoffs. So what's going to be your thoughts as we go to tracks that require the brakes a little bit more for the first round?
Darlington's fun. They released, or they updated it not too long ago, and it has dramatically less grip than it did in the spring on iRacing. So it's going to be challenging. It's going to be fun. You know, thank God we get back to some good racing. I look forward to it. I don't think I really have to worry about points. I can just let it fly.
Well, here's hoping then that you'll find yourself in some better luck then coming on over into the first round of the playoffs. It's been a pleasure, as always, having you up here, Sam. But before we let you go, anybody you'd like to shout out for your number 2 machine?
Yeah, I would like to thank Alan Balancio for being on the box tonight, Justin Rowden for the paint. I'd like to thank my teammates of Flat Out, Bradley Burke, Joey Tice, Michael Araya, and Grant Davis.
And we'll thank you as well, Sam, for coming up and once again giving us the chat track side here near Victory Lane. Thank you so much for your time. Best of luck next week at Daytona, and then, of course, for the playoffs.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it, guys.
That was your P2 finisher, Sam Vieto. I'm just going to find myself walking on over just a little further down pit road here. I'm going to find myself trackside now with Kyle Trudell, P3 finisher at the end of the night in his Extreme Performance Motorsports machine. Kyle, it was looking a bit tight for yourself in Cambridge there on those final laps.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Everybody was saving there. So I think, everybody, at least our group, was on the same page. And thankful for that, actually, because without some drafting help, I think for all 3 or 4 of us, none of us would have made it.
Let's touch, if I may, on, of course, the new draft package. It's very different from the last time you guys raced at Michigan, and in fact, from just even the start of this year. What do you think the new kind of high downforce, low horsepower package has done, to kind of change up the racing a little bit from the driver's perspective?
Well, I think I share a lot of the same viewpoints, with Sam, and I know a lot of us would rather have the most horsepower as possible and as little downforce as possible. I think we all want that. It's not the reality of, what the box we're put in. So sometimes, you just have to make the best of what you're given. But obviously, I think tire saving and having car control and throttle control, having to use the brake a little bit. I'm a big fan of that stuff, so I would much rather have the low downforce and high horsepower package. I think it would provide better racing overall. Because you would end up getting it's probably better racing in the end. I mean, racing this way with fuel saving and that kind of thing. I mean, it was a challenge into itself, but ultimately, it was kind of just waiting until the end.
We look forward to the playoffs. Of course, you're looking pretty safe in terms of points, along with Sam Vieto. That being said, Daytona is up next. Is the plan to focus up on Daytona, or are you already looking forward to the first round of the playoffs at Darlington?
Well, I'm definitely going to need to put some more track time in because in the last, since Pocono about, I really haven't gotten a whole lot of seat time, at least as much as I feel like I need, because I didn't perform very well road courses in the last 3-4 weeks. So I just need a little bit more seat time myself, and that way I can give myself a better shot at these top 5s and at the very least top 10s. I mean, that's what it's going to take to move through the playoffs. So I'll try to dedicate myself to getting some track time at Darlington for sure. I mean, Daytona kind of is what it is. Today was probably a good precursor to to that, at least being comfortable with the car, in the draft and how much it's going to move around. I haven't really been driving that much lately, so tonight with 15 minutes to go in practice is when I jumped in the session and got my first laps of the week here. So I wasn't really expecting too much. Top 10 is always the goal, but I should have saved, just like a few of the guys were saying too. I mean, I should have saved early in the run. I just didn't have the experience of running any laps. But with Marius's help and Mike as well, I mean, they coached me through that end of the race. But I'm looking forward to Daytona. I'm going to go for it.
Well, despite only have the 15 minutes of seat time prior to the race, a third-place finish is certainly not a bad result at all things considered. Before I let you go here, anybody you'd like to shout out for your Extreme Performance Motorsports number 7?
Yeah, like I said, Mike and Marius and the whole team, Brandon as well, newly on board. We're a gelled group, so it's pretty fun with those guys. So I want to thank XPM for sure. We got Magnolia Woodshop on the hood here as well. RaceSpot TV and SimSeats, some pretty cool products and things. So I recommend everybody jump out there and take a look at their site and what they have to offer. So yeah, I want to thank you guys as well for putting these broadcasts on. I always enjoy going back and watching the race and see what I can learn for maybe next week,
Well, here's to hoping that you'll find yourself with a good run at Daytona and indeed in the first round of playoffs. Thanks, Kyle, for taking the time to come on up and join us. Best of luck in the coming weeks.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
So that was Kyle Trudell from Extreme Performance Motorsports bringing it home to round out the podium here, Evan. And that will about do it then for the driver interviews. I tell you what, it'll be a spicy regular season finale over at Daytona.
If things change again with now 10 different race winners, and I'll just look at the points right now and rate it off, right? So with this race win, Adam de Blasio moves up. He's locked in. So all 10 race winners should be good. The only question would be Liam Sheen, right? He's still 24th in the points. Resetting it back to points. He needs to stay ahead of Eric Stanford. Liam Sheen is only 14 points to the good headed into Daytona to stay in the top 25. That's a big question mark. Daniel Eberhardt is, I think, 41 or 39, so not mathematically locked into the top 25. But Daniel Eberhardt's going to be in the playoffs this year. The question is, can Liam Sheen not drop those positions at Daytona? And then you look at the cut line, right? So things drop down from your top 16 with wins weighted. Rhett McBride is now the bubble driver, kind of on his own, right? Rabel, Nieto, those drivers are substantially ahead of him in the 70 to 80 point range. The Rhett McBride has 345 points. He is the last driver in on points. He is 14 points ahead of Bradley Burke. He is 19 points ahead of Kyle Kamer. Then it gets a little bit further for Thomas George, Ross Cato, Grant Davis, David Washington, Joseph Tice, Cody Harris, Jaron Weinmaster, all drivers who are not in the playoffs, but could use the Daytona win to get themselves locked in. So we're looking for race winners to stay top 25. We're looking at a points battle, and there's always a question. Do we see another first-time winner? Because that makes a significant change in the standings here tonight. So it's a really interesting points picture for Daytona next week, Nolan. But before we preview that one too much, I just want to mention, how weird tonight was. And there's the updated look at your standings, 10 race winners on the left-hand side. This was not the Michigan race that we were expecting. The drivers had their gripes. Not a fan of how it races. It raced how we thought the cars would. But just the way the race played out, caution-free, I don't really think was on my docket. So I'll give credit to the drivers for putting on a really good show tonight. It's been a while since we've had a fuel mileage show like that. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. In my opinion, fuel mileage races are some of the best types of races you can have, because that's how you know the racing has been clean. They're right up there with green, white checkers, which I think are a touch more exciting, because at that point it really is just foot to the floor to the end. But you've even had a combination of the two before. But hey, it was a good race. Like you said, caution-free. I believe one of the only caution-free races we have had all season so far, if you, of course, not counting the road courses in that batch. But you get a lot of these various drivers who are out here, so many different skill levels. The fact that they can put on such a good show like this, it truly is amazing. And it's a huge testament just to how competitive this field is and how much respect they have for one another. Now, of course, the championship is still as volatile as ever, as can be demonstrated by just how tight that bubble spot is.
And now we look forward to Daytona, right? Back in Speed Weeks, the duels were won by Trevor Trigo and Dane Cruz. Jeremy Miller won the season opening 250. Anybody could win at Daytona. But this is a different Daytona, right? We alluded to it at the start of the show, and you heard it there in some of the driver post-race interviews. iRacing has tweaked with the draft in efforts to make it more realistic, and it is a lot more difficult to make the big packs and the 2-3 wide moves quite as easily as you used to before. So it may take a strategized approach to that one. Listen, it can still get crazy. It's a Daytona night race. It's a regular season finale. There's drivers fighting for points. There's drivers going all out for wins. Anything can happen. But it may involve a little bit more strategy than it would have in the spring. And that could mean that alliances and teams could be a big factor.
Strategies is always a plus in a race like this. It means you can't just put your foot to the floor. You always have to think big picture, especially in a race like Daytona, where we could be seen racing a little bit more processional than I guess we were used to, especially since we are returning here from Speed Weeks all the way at the top of the season. Now, that is to say, especially with pit stops, it should be even more entertaining. Obviously, the pit stops are going to be even more critical at Daytona than they were here at Michigan, with just how much more powerful that draft is. We were talking about this before the top of the broadcast as well, Evan. Half a second, or even before the broadcast, half a second out of that draft at Daytona, you are not going anywhere unless you got at least 5 cars with you. So these guys are going to have to be on the ball all day long on Daytona, which means we should be in for one heck of a race for the end of the regular season.
And you can catch that one here next week. But until then, that is it for us here tonight from virtual Michigan International Speedway. I want to say a big thanks to everybody behind the scenes for making these shows possible, the entire team at RaceSpot TV, everybody at RSR, and of course for your broadcast team tonight. For our producer extraordinaire downstairs, Hugo Luis, for Nolan Rempel, and myself, Evan Pasoko, I want to thank you for tuning in and joining us tonight, and congratulate tonight's race winner, Adam de Blasio. We are back, though, in 1 week's time for the regular season finale from Daytona International Speedway. That one on Monday, August the 30th. It's a 9 o'clock Eastern Time start right here. That race and every race of the 2021 SimSeats RealSimRacing Cup Series can be found exclusively right here on RaceSpot TV. Until next time, good night from Brooklyn, Michigan, where Adam de Blasio is the 80th different winner in RSR Cup Series history.